Hey, greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I am so thrilled to be here with you guys today and to bring on this rock star guest of mine. But before we get started, I wanted to make some announcements with you. The Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White, it will be aired on the SoulNet WKDH radio station from Monday through Friday every 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tune in at www.soulnetwkdh.com to tune in. Also, I wanted to share with you guys an opportunity for us to connect. If you want to connect with me via social media, you can go to my Facebook at Miss India White, my LinkedIn, The India White, Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. My Big Ideas Twitter is iWhiteBIL. My Instagram is Indie238 and YouTube channel, you can like and subscribe, it's India White 123. So also feel free to check out my website, www.india-white.com, for some other interesting information on there and just to get to know about who I am overall. So with that said, I am thrilled to bring on the show today someone that has been so influential in the world of education, and silent influencer, but also on the stage, visible, present, doing a great work. And this is none other than Paul Battaglia with Big Ideas Learning. He is a speaker, he is an author, and he also is a high school educator. So welcome, Paul, to our show.
Thank you, Indy. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. It is an honor. It is a high honor, Paul. So, for those that don't know about you and they're trying to know about grit and the things that you've done. Before we really get started on that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm married to my wife, Janice, for 20 years. We just celebrated in the summer. So that was exciting. Yeah. Married with four kids. My oldest is a sophomore in college.
Okay.
I have a freshman and sophomore in high school. So not only am I in the trenches teaching every day, but I go home and we're working on some high school math with them too. And then I have a fourth grader too. So yeah.
Okay. So you have been in education for how long, Paul?
This is my 25th year.
Wow. 25 years. And so now I want to ask you some questions regarding your role in education and sure, what that means to you when you look in the lens of grit. But before we get started, can you please tell us, what is your definition of grit? How do you define grit?
Yeah, I think it, first off, it goes across all domains. Right. So it's the ability to confront and manage and navigate challenges, develop resilience, to continue to learn, kind of know what you don't know, find out what you don't know. Right. And really the way I look at it, at least, is it's the ability to just always expect more from yourself in whatever situation that is, so not to expect any excuse for not being able to learn something, understand something, figure something out, help somebody, any domain, really.
Right. Well, this is absolutely true. Now, my question to you, though, is you've said a mouthful about grit. And of course, I say that grit is great resilience in time. So, when you're talking about resilience, that's spot on. But as a high school educator for so long, how have you been able to cultivate grit in your students?
So I think math is a privilege in being able to do that, to be honest with you, because if you think about many of the stigmas that are associated with math, some of which probably I myself had them when I was younger, I think a lot of times people see a math educator and they just think that you're a genius, you're really good at math, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, and this is kind of, I think, what drew me to the profession, was when I get in front of a class or when I'm working beside my students in a class, I relish the opportunity to see a challenge the way they see it and to try to help walk them through some of the things they need to consider with that challenge. And because of that, I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't want to be just the lecturer. I really want to see them struggle, but I think that's easy for me to say, but it's not fair if I don't say that to them right in the beginning. Yeah. Right? That struggle is going to be a part of this process, and there's going to be things that you're not going to be comfortable with, familiar with. You may have to go back in the treasure chest a little bit to figure out why something is still relevant to what we're doing now. But if I can use that mentality as the educator, right, then I do believe that that helps me cultivate grit within the student body, because I'm teaching them that we're after something. We're after
Right.
something. We're not going to rest until we get what we want.
Yes. Wow, that's powerful. I like the end where you said we're not going to rest until we get what we want. Now, when you're dealing with students, I'm not sure if you've served only Calc students or if you served students in, classes prior to Calc, maybe some students that weren't as proficient as other students. But when you're in this realm here and you're serving students, whether they're underserved or that calculus student that's trying to go to the next level, how do you help them to really embrace that struggle, like you're saying, and to not quit? And when do you know that there is, a place where they need to kind of chill out and take a break?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing I do is anything that we do as much as possible is it all comes back to relevance for me. Mm-hmm. So no matter who the student is, like you said before, even the underserved student, the student who may fall through the cracks, right? Relevance to me is huge, because that's my way of connecting with that student. Now, relevance, there's a lot behind that, right? So this starts in the beginning of the year when I'm trying to ascertain from them, just who they are and what their interests are and what their life is all about. What's their home situation like? Meaning, what do you like to do at home? What is home like to you? Do you enjoy even being there? Is school a respite for you? All these things that I'm asking in a private situation, so that I can reflect on and say, okay, student A struggles when we encounter these kinds of situations. Okay, how can I make what we're doing relevant to student A? What do they like? Yeah, what do they like? What do they respond to? What gets them going in the morning? And that could be everything from family, culture, video games. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So that's always been the challenge for me. Is I don't know what I'm walking into every year, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because I have to learn about my kids so that I can, because it's not relevant if I don't do that, right? So
right. Now, this is powerful that you said that, because I found as well, Paul, that when you're trying to get to know the student, bringing in that relevance, bringing in their background, and really taking intentional time to get to know them. Now, how have you been able to, through relevance, I guess, cultivate grit especially in students that might be underserved or students of ethnic background? So, for instance, a student, they might be a first generation, but they're amazing. They're a scholar, but they might not necessarily know how to, climb that ladder. They might not know how to relate to some of the problems in the textbook. So what are some strategies that you've been able to?
So I'll give you two examples. One example is from a little bit further back. So one of the first classes I taught in Algebra 1, right, was a class that was 50% Spanish native speaking students, right, with very little English speaking skills. And the other 50% were totally assimilated students into the typical public school environment, right? So one of the things I had to do for them was, and at that point I was very lucky and fortunate that I still had some pretty good fluency with the language. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I had to do was show them, listen, the grit you're going to see from me trying to be able to communicate with you is kind of my promise to you, right? That I care about you and I care about bringing you along here. And so they were so kind. I mean, these are 13, 14-year-old kids. They were so kind to correct me, to help me fill in the blanks, right? So that, because they knew, hey, he's trying to help us. Yeah, he's trying to help us. So they saw that, and then they performed with that same grit when things shut down. They were first to say, I have a question. I don't understand. Can you please explain this a different way?
So you help the guards come down by using a part of them, a part of their culture, which was, in this case, it was their language, which is beautiful. And I say this so many times, the power of really incorporating culture into the environment is what really is going to help bridge the gap and break down the walls and the barriers that might be in the class. And, I talk a lot, Paul, about how, right now there's like a cultural shift taking place, but currently we've got predominantly European teachers are teaching students across the nation, but the majority of students are diverse, right? And so there has always been this kind of like elephant in the room. People don't really know how to, as teachers, they don't really know how to, kind of bridge the gap and cross over and help students. But I like what you're saying here, because you said that you're going to intentionally, nobody asked you to do that. Nobody's, okay, you need to get to know their language. You need to, get to know their families. And so talk about the process of grit that you use professionally to kind of get through the hurdles that you faced, whether it was like internally or whether it was like your environment. How did you get through those hurdles so that you could really connect with your students?
So the seismic shift for me, unfortunately, came back in 2008 when I had been teaching for 10 years, right? And just quick side note, teaching was not my out of the gate profession. So I went to school for actuarial science, which is like a super hyper specific major, worked in that field for a very short time, and then kind of felt my calling, which is a different story, kind of into education. Okay, so it's now I've been teaching for 10 years, right? And I don't know. I mean, I feel after you've been teaching for 10 years, I think you can start to call yourself a veteran, right? Maybe, which is probably the biggest mistake I think I had from a humility standpoint, right? Is you just fall into that idea of like, I think I have the idea here. I think I know what we're doing,
Yeah.
And then and again, I had this class, and it happened to be a calculus class. It didn't have to be, but it was an AP class. And they were just kind of like the bad news bears, like they just couldn't do anything right at the right moment, So I frustrated. And we went through the whole year. I mean, we had good moments too, but just very frustrating. Trying to instill upon them, like you're saying, the grit, the idea of you can't rest until you figure out what it is that you're not doing right. I can't rest until I connect with you. What am I missing? I'm not clearly not reaching you, right? Wow. So what was it centered upon though? It was centered selfishly upon, I want these students to do well in this AP exam, right? Okay, well, none of that mattered in late April when one of those students took his own life. And then what I realized in that moment, instantly in that moment was, I don't know these kids at all. I don't know these kids because if I did, then maybe I would have seen this coming. And honestly, we could all play Monday morning quarterback, but the reality is that set off a contagion in our community where we would then go on to experience this like double-digit times in the next like 18 months. So from that moment on, I kind of made a vow to myself that basically said, you are going to know your kids more than your content. And nothing else matters.
Oh my word.
Oh
my word, Paul.
So then professionally, right? That's the grit. I have to figure this out now. We're back to ground zero now. You don't know anything. So you better start over and figure this out.
I'm sorry, you got me. That is what we live for. You are going to know your kids more than you know the content. Listen, educators, listen, leaders, because we get so in love with math or so in love with our subject area.
Yep,
I mean, I know what it's like to be that math dork, and you're just like, you're just getting your math moment off of, looking at transformation of functions, right? And you're just loving it. And you see all the parent functions and all the but then that student in the way back, come on, see the kid.
Why should I care about this, right?
Yeah.
I'm having a terrible day right now. Right.
But the fact that this has turned into almost like just a legacy that you're building now of, I will do whatever it takes, no matter what, to get to know my kids, no matter, any fears, any qualms that I might have concerning those kids. So my question to you then is, how do you then use grit to elevate student voice in the classroom and to really allow those students to go beyond any fears and qualms that they might have as well? How do you use grit for that?
Yeah, so we try to create this safe space, right? And so first thing, I want them to be okay with. I don't even love the word, but we use it so many times. We want students to be okay with failure. I mean, is it failure, or is it just a matter of trying to figure things out? Really, I mean, if I don't know how to change my oil, have I failed, or I just haven't figured it out yet? So we try to create this safe space in the classroom where when a student volunteers something, especially like you said, where the student, typically is a shy student, maybe they've even indicated to me in those beginning of the year surveys, I do not speak in class, do not call on me, but then you have that breakthrough moment where all of a sudden, the student says, I think I know what I'm talking about. Yes. And so not only do I let them speak, obviously, right, but I will find like these secret moments during the class to say, hey, do we remember what Veronica said? Right? Yeah. Do you guys remember that? Do you remember when Asia Lee said that last week? And she said, she had noticed this pattern Okay, now how can we take that pattern and go with it? And I think that when students see, oh, that's the girl or the guy who never says a word, and he's highlighting him or her now, right? He's highlighting, and honestly, like, because what do students want? They still want to know their worth, right? So that, I think, spurs them to say, well, I think I see a pattern. Maybe call him in.
Beautiful.
You know, and
Beautiful.
again, it's just not shutting anybody down. And then when they're wrong, right? My first response, again, probably in my early years, was no, good thought, or now my response is, what do you think? What do you think?
That's right.
Instead of me answering whether it's right or wrong, let's let the other students tell us what they think.
Right.
So
I'm so excited by your responses, because it's like, it's everything we live for, right? And so it's just beautiful to know that educators are in safe hands. When working with you and with the work that you've done. And so my next question to you is, how have you used grit now professionally? So you've been an educator all this time. I mean, you're raising a family, you're writing textbooks for, big ideas, you're a speaker, you're doing so much. How have you used grit professionally to kind of deal with all this?
Yeah, so time management has been, as you know, right, has become a really, really important part of my life, and but more so is kind of having a very clear picture, which again takes some thinking, but clear picture of what is my massive purpose, right? And if I'm going to be able to write a textbook or book a speaking engagement, and then come into the classroom and not let them down, right, and write an effective lesson plan or create a really good assessment, right? Then to me, it all comes back to having the ability to manage your time and to prioritize, do these things flow into that massive purpose? Because if they don't, and I think this is hard for all teachers, you have to learn to say no to certain things, right? And so if I don't say no to certain things, then clearly I'm not going to be able to give somebody whatever they asked,
Right.
So to kind of sum it all up, right? It's the ability to maintain focus. It's the ability to, I would say, work in a diligent manner, but give yourself that break, that chill time, that relaxed time. For me personally, I use what's called the Pomodoro method, I think it's called, which is one of these, where you're in that focus state for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, then you're in that 25-minute focus state again, and I try to block out a good 2 to 3 hours of a day. It doesn't have to be every day, could even be like on an early Saturday morning or something, where uninterrupted time, and the night before I've already written out, this is what that looks like. From 5 to 5:30, this is what it'll be. From 5:30 to 6:30, this is what it'll be. Does that make sense?
Like
I don't know.
Spiritual time that you use grit. This is kind of spiritual, where you take those moments to kind of reflect, and maybe a little meditation or just getting quieting yourself. Because I think educators need to hear some options. I've not heard of this method, honestly. What it's called, Pomodoro method?
It's called Pomodoro. You could even, if you go online and type in Pomodoro timer, there's even a website that you could go on and it'll time it for you, and it'll ding when the time is up, and it'll tell you
really
when that segment's up. But from a spiritual perspective, full disclosure, I'm a man of faith, and I'm very proud of that. And my morning, my day does not start without some spiritual time. So it's actually the first thing I do is I wake up at 4:30 and I spend about a half hour in just quiet reflection, or I might be reading scripture, I might be listening to a devotional, I might be reading a specific book like I am right now. And so nothing happens before that. Then usually I will work out or do something active for about 30 minutes to an hour, and especially on the weekends, right? So all this has to happen before anybody's awake, in my opinion, because then the days I've lost it.
Wow, this is so true. So that's the children, right? Oh my God!
And so the grit in the spiritual part is the consistency. That's the best way to say it. It's the consistency. Could I wake up tomorrow and say, I don't feel like reading the scripture, or I don't feel like spending some quiet time? Yes, I absolutely can. I can. But again, it's the discipline and the consistency to know. And this is how, again, let's not to go on about it, but how do we teach students this, right? I'm here every day. I want you to see the consistency. I'm here every single day. And as long as you can be here, then I'm gonna be 100% ready for you. I want you to try to be 100% ready for me. But the consistency, you might not see it today, tomorrow, Friday, but in 2 months from now, I hope you look back and say, "Wow, I didn't know I could do all that."
Yes,
And it's the same thing in life.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you're saying this, and I'm starting to think about underserved kids who might not have a culture of grit, and they don't really care to have it. They might not have it really modeled for them outside of the classroom at times. Sometimes they do, and they still choose, through peer pressure to choose a way that, kind of goes against the grain. So how have you helped students cultivate grit when they're in the midst of choosing peer pressure versus, do I really want to show my teacher that I'm learning?
Yeah. So I think it starts with being non-judgmental, right? Does that make some sense? So if I have a student who, like you said, there's a little apathy there, or again, I think sometimes we even mistake apathy for, there's some really heavy stuff going on in this student's life right now, And so I just like to let them know, hey, I see you, and I know that I demand a lot from you, and I know that I might be asking you to push a little far. So what I need you to do for me today, if this is not one of those days, is just give me a thumbs down, or just kind of write I'm going to give you a little sticky note. Just write something on that sticky note. I don't have to call on you. I'm going to check in on you. I hope you don't mind.
Right.
And then you try to catch them after class and say, listen, I just want to let you know you're having a bad day today, and we all have bad days, and I don't judge you for it. So you tell me when you're ready to roll. I'll sit with you, and we're going to figure this out. Wow. But I hope your day gets better, and just be. This is the human aspect, right? I mean, they're a human being, right? So I don't know it's not their responsibility to tell me what's going on in their life if they don't want to,
Right. But it's also that socio-emotional component of you're trying to really be intentional and finding out how that student is feeling and how are they socially acclimating to the environment, and the fact that you care enough about them to do this. This is the piece that I'm hearing from you, is that you actually care about these students. And even though you're teaching this rigorous level of class, because I'm going to tell you, not everybody has a really powerful experience where, they're higher ed, or higher level teachers in the math in particular care about them. Like they're so in love with math that sometimes these teachers, because they are so much pressure on those AP exams, right? Sometimes those teachers are a little bit stoic, distant, and they're not trying to be, and they come off as cold. And so the students are, they're in a culture and an environment outside of that classroom where socially having that social interaction is key. So they want to feel like they belong. They want to feel like their culture is great. They want to feel like, they can thrive with others around them, including their educators. And then they get into certain spaces like that Calc class or that Calc 2 class, and then it's cold. And they're just kind of looking like, or they're not used to that. And when I say cold, it's that culture of that it's like an unspoken expectation that many higher leveled, professors or educators have, where it's like, you don't talk when you're not supposed to talk, you're not going to do anything but the math. I don't need to show you a lot of, visible things. I don't need to, basically pull out the bells and whistles.
No manipulatives, right? You need to appreciate it for what it is, right?
Right. But the thing is, some of these babies that are coming to us, they're going to need us to still make that personal connection, even in Calc or Calc 2 class or differential equations, whatever class it is, they're still going to need that connection. And so the thing that is getting me here is you have been so intentional in making that connection. And I want to commend you for that. And so I want to now ask you, how do you use grit personally, and how do you teach this to your students? How do they use grit to thrive through hopelessness?
How about one question? And it goes back to some of the things we talked about earlier, right? I think first off, you have to be able to recognize the student who might be feeling hopeless. Now, some kids are really good. They're really good at hiding it,
Yes, they are.
But
yes, they are. I know
some of them, some of them can't help but show it, right? So I think in that moment, I think the question that I've found to be the most helpful is, And again, not in front of the whole class, obviously. Maybe it's before class outside, in the hallway, or maybe, once we've gotten started, it's me just kind of coming over and kneeling down next to them and just saying, do you need help? Do you need help?
Wow.
And because
Wow.
I think if somebody is feeling hopeless, they feel like there is no help, or nobody sees that they need the help, right? And so I tell them, listen, I'm not saying I'm going to be the one to help. I would love to be the one to help you, but I'm not an expert in everything. So
Wow.
and you don't have to tell me your whole story, but if you say to me, yeah, I don't know what to do right now, or I just had a fight with my best friend, or my boyfriend broke up with me, or my mom said, get out of the house, or, we had a really traumatic situation at home last night. I don't want to speak about it, but I just don't know what to do. That is an opening that I need to take, and to say, okay, listen, what's grit? Grit is asking for help when you need help. And and for me as an educator, it's being able to find the help, right, for a student, so that they can get the help they need, and just kind of make that life a little better.
Right. Instead of running to the administration to, do a disciplinary report or referral.
No, right.
I mean, that's one of my soapboxes, because I feel that so many times it's easy to just give it to the administration and let them handle it, and not knowing that the consequence could be something so much bigger than it should have been. But that this child is really reaching out for help, and so now this makes me shift to what you're doing today as an author for Big Ideas, Larson Text, and for the way that you go out and you speak and you do presentations and you speak at various platforms in education. Have you ever felt that when you're, especially as you're an author, and it's an honor to be among you, but as an author, have you ever felt that there were times that you just needed grit? And how did you push through some of the deadlines or some of the assignments that you had as you're writing the textbooks?
I'd be feeling that right now.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like there's a tremendous responsibility. Not only is it a privilege to be an author, right, but there's a tremendous responsibility that comes with that, knowing that there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are going to be very interested in what you have to say. They'll all have their own opinions, right? All of which are valid. And it's, as we know, it's impossible to try to on the front end of it, please 10,000 people or whatever the number might be, right? So it's those times when it's those times when I struggle, that I try to be as humble as possible. I'm not always great at it, right? But try to remember that it's not about me. I'm just basically I'm just being used, right, in a good way to, this is kind of like my anointing, right? This is what I've placed you here for. And so you need to spread your expertise, if it is, with people who need it. And that is what needs to get you through right now. And so you need to find that voice, right? And when I hear that, when I feel that way, the way you're describing, and, I'm either upset or stuck or frustrated, it's just easy to try to kind of throw in the towel. But it's easier if I can figure out, wait a minute, how about you just get out of your feelings for about 5 seconds and just think about the people that are going to benefit from this if you could just put together a really good product.
Wow, that's so beautifully said. And I'm glad you said that, because it is encouraging. And I think that, like you said, it's a calling and it's a privilege. It's an honor. And when you're chosen for this work, you have to do it with accountability. And I think that we're doing our best to provide a product, right, for many that will change the trajectory of education in a great way, and also continue to add on to a beautiful product. So I just want to say, thank you for the work that you've done over all these years, as an author and as a speaker. And so with that said, I want to ask you another question as we are, wrapping up our journey here. And that question is going to be, do you have any advice for people, for the listeners, regarding how they can, cultivate grit, or, any last minute nuggets that you have for anyone?
Yeah. And I would say it's not even authentic advice, so I can't take credit for it, but there's been a lot of people who've used the same thing, but I do think it resonates and it makes sense. And that is, you have to find your why, you have to find your passion. And it's really difficult to find grit without the reason why you're trying to be gritty.
Yep.
Right? So whatever that might be, for some people it's family. For some people it's trying to prove to themselves that they're more than maybe other people thought they could be, you know?
Wow.
And so for me, it was once I found my why, and not that can't change, right? I mean, like I illustrated before, right? I mean, not that can't morph and mold as you kind of move through life, but if you can find that passion and that why behind what you're doing and why you think it's important, you don't need to worry about what other people are saying, because you just have to realize that, like you said, it's your calling, and so you just have to kind of put that in front of you as your beacon, and say whatever I got to do to keep my focus on that, I have to do. So I know it's probably it's not new advice, so that's not gonna be the title of a book or anything, but
Well, I'm grateful that you did share that advice, because it was very powerful and very true. And so we will definitely receive that advice. And, for you listeners out there, do what you can to find your passion, find your why, like Paul has done as an author and as a speaker. And so with that said, I want to ask also, Paul, how can we reach you for future speaking engagements or future opportunities in education or whatnot? How can the audience reach you?
Yeah, a couple of ways. I mean, Twitter, I'm active on Twitter, so that's just at Paul Battaglia. So that's nice and simple. You can email me, and that's paulbattaglia@bebetterteachbetter.com. And that's also the name of my website, www.bebetterteachbetter.com. So there's a link on there where you can reach out to me. Yeah, any one of those ways is the best, probably.
I'll make sure to show your website 1 second.
No problem.
bebetterteachbetter.com. Yeah. And so what services do you offer, Paul, for those interested?
Yeah, so anyone looking, we can do anything from one-on-one mentorship, which I've done in the past, to speaking for small groups, large groups, conferences, invocations, and any of those things. So we can even do one of the ones I have coming up in the summer will be, we'll start with an invocation, but then it'll break out into small group sessions, and we'll be working all day together on some different things, not just with the math department either. So yeah.
Well, excellent. And thanks so much for sharing. I put your website up there. So guys, if you are interested in connecting with Paul, please get with him. He is busy, however, with his Big Ideas textbook as well. So please get with him when you can, so he can fill you in before his schedule gets completely full. So with that said, guys, thanks so much for joining us today on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I'm so honored to have you on here, Paul. And again, just for last minute announcements, you guys can see the Real Talk Show or the Let's Get Gritty podcast. It'll be aired on Soulnet WKDH every Monday through Friday as well, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it will also be featured on Swain Girl Media Channel, which you can find that on iTunes and Fire Stick or whatnot. So thanks so much for joining us today. Paul, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Let's Get Gritty podcast.
Thank you, India. Your work is amazing too. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you. Anytime. So with that said, guys, have a wonderful, wonderful day. And until next time,